Rebecca stood behind the register, her eyes darting to the clock mounted on the back wall of the grocery store. Only 15 minutes left in her shift, and she could finally head home. Her feet ached from standing all day, and her back was sore from lifting heavy bags of groceries for the last 8 hours. But none of that compared to the mental fatigue she felt after dealing with disgruntled customers, endless scanning, and keeping her polite smile plastered on her face. It was just another ordinary day for Rebecca. At 28, she had been working as a cashier at Ridgewood Supermarket for nearly 3 years. It wasn't the job she had dreamed of when she was younger, but it paid the bills, barely. She had always hoped to do something more with her life, but after struggling through college and dropping out due to financial troubles, she ended up here, scanning groceries for minimum wage. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work, and she did her best to get by. As she absent-mindedly scanned a loaf of bread for the elderly woman standing at the counter, her mind wandered. She had rent due in a few days, and her paycheck wouldn't stretch far enough. There were always unexpected expenses, an electric bill that was higher than expected, or an emergency car repair. It seemed like she was always one step behind, never quite able to catch up. Still, Rebecca prided herself on being good at her job. She was friendly, efficient, and always tried to make the customer's day a little brighter, even if her own was far from it. "Have a great evening," Rebecca said with a smile, handing the old woman her receipt and change. The woman smiled back warmly. "Thank you, dear. You have a lovely night, too." As the woman shuffled away with her groceries, Rebecca exhaled, glancing at the growing line of customers in front of her. The store was busy, as usual, with people rushing to buy last-minute groceries after work. Just as she was about to start scanning the next customer's items, she noticed a young couple walking into the store, pushing a rickety old shopping cart. They caught her attention right away. The man, probably in his early 30s, had a scruffy beard and wore a worn-out jacket that looked like it had seen better days. His eyes were tired, and he had an air of quiet desperation about him. The woman beside him, likely his wife, clutched a small child in her arms, a little girl no older than 3 or 4. Rebecca watched them from the corner of her eye as they moved slowly down the aisles. The man kept checking his wallet and looking at the price tags, while the woman whispered something in his ear, concern etched across her face. They walked cautiously, as if every item they placed in the cart was a painful decision. Something tugged at Rebecca's heart. She had seen families like this before, struggling to make ends meet, trying to stretch every dollar to feed their children. It was a sight that reminded her of her own childhood, growing up in a family that never had enough. The looks on their faces, the quiet worry, the hope that maybe this time the money would be enough to cover the essentials. It was all too familiar. Rebecca's attention was pulled back to the present as a customer tapped impatiently on the counter, reminding her that she still had a job to do. She resumed scanning the groceries, her mind distracted by thoughts of the young family. 15 minutes later, the young couple made their way to Rebecca's register, their cart filled with modest items: milk, bread, canned beans, rice, and some fresh vegetables. The little girl clung to her mother's leg, her big brown eyes staring up at the cashier as Rebecca offered her a kind smile. "Hi there," Rebecca greeted them warmly. "How are you all doing tonight?" The man cleared his throat, looking slightly embarrassed, as he set a crumpled envelope on the counter. We're all right," he mumbled, avoiding her gaze. "Just need to get the basics for the week." Rebecca nodded, understanding. She began scanning their items, moving as quickly as she could to get them through the line without causing them further discomfort. As the total began to add up on the register, she noticed the man glancing nervously at the screen, his hand tightening around the envelope. His wife shifted anxiously beside him, her eyes flickering between the cart and the cashier. Rebecca rang up the last item, a carton of eggs. and the total appeared on the screen. "That'll be $54.32, she said softly, sensing the tension. The man opened the envelope and carefully counted the bills inside. Rebecca's heart sank as she saw the small stack of crumpled $1 bills. He was short by a lot. He hesitated, his face flushed with embarrassment as he turned to his wife. "I'm sorry," he whispered to her. "I don't think we have enough." His wife bit her lip, trying to hold back tears. "We'll have to put some things back," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Rebecca's chest tightened. She hated moments like this, moments where she had to stand by helplessly while families struggled to buy the food they needed. It wasn't the first time she'd seen it, and it wouldn't be the last, but it never got easier. She hated the look of shame on their faces, the way they tried to hide their desperation. Before the man could start removing items from the cart, Rebecca acted on instinct. "Wait," she said gently, reaching out a hand to stop them. "It's okay. I can cover the difference." The man looked at her, confused. "No, we couldn't ask you to do that," he stammered. Rebecca shook her head, offering him a reassuring smile. "Please, it's no trouble. I've been in your shoes before, and I know what it's like. Let me help." The couple exchanged glances, unsure of what to say. The little girl, unaware of the tension surrounding her, reached for the bag of apples in the cart, tugging on her mother's sleeve. Tears welled up in the wife's eyes as she nodded gratefully. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Rebecca quickly entered a code into the register and paid the remaining balance with her own card. It wasn't much, but she knew it meant the world to them. "You didn't have to do that," the man said softly, his voice choked with gratitude. "I know," Rebecca replied with a gentle smile, "but I wanted to." As they gathered their bags, the woman turned to Rebecca one last time. "You've helped us more than you know," she said, tears streaming down her face. "We won't forget this." Rebecca nodded, her heart swelling with warmth. "Take care of yourselves," she said, waving as they left the store. As the couple walked out, Rebecca felt a sense of quiet satisfaction. It was moments like this that reminded her why she enjoyed helping people, even in small ways. She had made a difference, even if just for one family, and that was worth more than the paycheck she struggled to stretch. However, her moment of warmth was short-lived. Just as she was about to clock out for the night, her manager, Sarah, approached her with a stern expression. Sarah was a no-nonsense type of person, someone who ran the store with an iron fist. She had little patience for mistakes or anything that deviated from the rules. "Rebecca, can I speak to you in my office for a moment?" Sarah asked, her tone sharp. Rebecca's heart sank. She had a feeling she knew what this was about. Following Sarah into the small, cluttered office at the back of the store, Rebecca sat down nervously. Sarah closed the door and took a seat behind her desk, folding her hands in front of her. "I just reviewed the footage from the security cameras," Sarah began, her voice cold. "I saw what you did at the register with that family." Rebecca's stomach twisted with anxiety. She had always been careful not to break any major rules, but she had a sinking feeling this time was different. "I helped them," Rebecca said cautiously. "They didn't have enough money, and I covered the rest with my own." Sarah's expression didn't soften. In fact, it seemed to harden even more. "That's against company policy," she snapped. "You know we're not allowed to give discounts, pay for customers' groceries, or make any personal financial transactions at the register." "I was just trying to help," Rebecca explained, her voice trembling. "They were struggling, and I couldn't just stand there and do nothing." Sarah leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "Whether or not you were trying to help doesn't matter. The rules are the rules, and you broke them. This is a serious infraction, Rebecca. I don't have a choice but to terminate your employment." Rebecca's heart dropped. Terminate? Fired? She had known she was crossing a line, but she hadn't expected it to lead to this. "Please, Sarah," Rebecca pleaded, her voice shaking. "I've worked here for 3 years. I've never caused any problems before. I know I made a mistake, but can't you give me a warning? I need this job." Sarah sighed, her tone slightly less harsh but still firm. "I know you've been a good employee, Rebecca, but this is a direct violation of policy. It sets a bad precedent. If I let you off with a warning, others might think they can do the same. My hands are tied." Tears welled up in Rebecca's eyes as she realized the severity of the situation. She had just lost her job, a job that, while not perfect, had been her only source of income. How would she pay her bills? How would she survive? "I'm sorry," Sarah added, though her tone lacked genuine sympathy. "You can gather your things and leave. Your final paycheck will be mailed to you." Rebecca sat there for a moment, too stunned to move. She felt a wave of helplessness wash over her, followed by anger and frustration. She had only been trying to do the right thing, to help a family in need, and now she was being punished for it. Without another word, she stood up, her legs shaky beneath her, and left the office. As she walked through the store for the last time, her fellow employees gave her sympathetic glances, but no one dared to say anything. They knew Sarah's strict policies and didn't want to risk their own jobs. Rebecca gathered her few belongings from her locker, her mind racing. What was she going to do now? The days that followed were some of the hardest Rebecca had ever faced. Without a job, she quickly found herself sinking into a financial hole. Her savings, what little she had, was depleted within weeks, and she struggled to pay her rent, utilities, and other bills. She applied for jobs everywhere she could, from coffee shops to retail stores, but with the job market as competitive as it was, no one seemed to be hiring. Her stress mounted, and she spent many sleepless nights worrying about how she would make it through. The generosity she had shown that family, which had once filled her with a sense of pride, now seemed like a mistake. She had been too impulsive, too naive, thinking that helping someone else wouldn't come at a cost to her. Weeks turned into months, and Rebecca found herself in an increasingly desperate situation. She had to sell some of her possessions just to make rent, and even that wasn't enough. She was late on her payments, and the landlord had already threatened eviction if she didn't come up with the money soon. Her phone rang constantly with calls from creditors demanding payments she couldn't make. Each ring felt like a dagger in her chest, reminding her of how far she had fallen. She had always been independent, always taken care of herself, but now she was on the verge of losing everything. The worst part of it all was the gnawing sense of doubt that had taken root in her heart. Had she made a mistake by helping that family? Had she been foolish to risk her job for the sake of doing the right thing? Maybe Sarah had been right. Maybe rules were there for a reason, and stepping out of line, no matter how well-intentioned, came with consequences. Rebecca tried not to dwell on it, but the doubt lingered, and with each passing day it grew harder to hold on to the belief that she had done the right thing. 3 months after Rebecca lost her job, she was sitting in her small apartment, staring at a stack of overdue bills, when there was a knock at the door. She wasn't expecting anyone, and for a moment she considered not answering. She didn't have the energy for more bad news, and she certainly didn't want to face another creditor in person. But the knock came again, more insistent this time. With a sigh, Rebecca rose from her chair and crossed the room to the door. She opened it cautiously, peeking through the crack. Standing on the other side was a familiar face, though she couldn't place it right away. It was the man from the grocery store, the one she had helped months ago. He looked different now, cleaner, more put together. His scruffy beard was neatly trimmed, and he wore a nice jacket. He smiled when he saw her. "Hi, Rebecca," he said softly. Rebecca blinked in surprise. I remember you, from Ridgewood Supermarket." The man nodded. "That's right. You helped me and my family when we were going through a really tough time. I've been looking for you for weeks. I finally found out where you lived from one of the old employees at the store." Rebecca stepped aside, gesturing for him to come in. She was still in shock, wondering why he had come after all this time. "I didn't expect to see you again," Rebecca admitted, as she led him to the small living room. "I'm glad things seem to be better for you and your family now." The man sat down, looking around the modest apartment with a grateful smile. "Things are a lot better, thanks to you," he said. "You have no idea how much your kindness that night meant to us. I don't know if you realize it, but we were about to lose our home. We had nothing left. I had just lost my job, and my wife had been laid off. We were barely scraping by, and that night, I didn't know how we were going to feed our daughter. What you did, it changed everything for us." Rebecca felt a lump form in her throat. She had always hoped she'd made a difference, but hearing it firsthand was overwhelming. "I didn't do much," Rebecca said modestly. "It was just a few dollars." The man shook his head. "It wasn't just the money. It was the fact that you cared enough to help when no one else would. You gave us hope when we had none left. That night, after we got home, my wife and I made a promise to each other that we would get back on our feet. And we did. I got a new job, and things have been getting better ever since." Rebecca smiled, though there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. "I'm really glad to hear that," she said softly. "But things haven't been great for me since that night. I lost my job because I broke company policy by helping you. I've been struggling to find work, and I'm about to lose my apartment." The man's expression changed, his face filled with concern. "I had no idea," he said, his voice filled with guilt. "I'm so sorry, Rebecca. If I had known, I would have come sooner." Rebecca waved off his concern. "It's not your fault. I made the choice to help you, and I knew there could be consequences." The man sat silently for a moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. "I know this doesn't make up for everything you've been through, but I've been saving up some money to give you as a thank you. You helped us when we had nothing, and now it's our turn to help you." Rebecca's eyes widened as he handed her the envelope. She opened it, and her breath caught in her throat. Inside was more money than she had ever expected, enough to cover her rent for several months, and then some. "I can't take this," Rebecca said, her voice trembling. "You've already been through so much. You should keep this for your family." The man smiled gently. "Rebecca, you helped us when you had no reason to. You put yourself on the line for a family you didn't even know. This is the least we can do to repay you. Please, take it." Tears filled Rebecca's eyes as she realized the magnitude of what was happening. She had spent months doubting herself, wondering if her decision to help that family had been a mistake. But now, here they were, offering her a lifeline when she needed it most. "Thank you," Rebecca whispered, her voice breaking. "I don't know what to say." The man stood up, smiling warmly. "You don't have to say anything. Just know that your kindness changed our lives, and now it's changing yours." Rebecca accepted the man's gift, and in the weeks that followed, her life began to turn around. With the money he had given her, she was able to pay off her overdue rent and avoid eviction. She finally had the breathing room to focus on finding a new job, and with a renewed sense of purpose, she threw herself into the search. It wasn't long before she landed a position at a local non-profit organization, an organization dedicated to helping struggling families get back on their feet. The irony wasn't lost on her, but she welcomed it with open arms. Now she had the opportunity to pay it forward, to help others in the same way she had helped that family months ago. Rebecca quickly became an integral part of the non-profit, using her empathy and understanding to connect with families who were going through tough times. She helped them find housing, jobs, and financial assistance, and her work became more than just a paycheck. It became her passion. As time passed, the story of what had happened at Ridgewood Supermarket spread. It started with the family she had helped, who shared their story with friends and neighbors. Word got out about the cashier who had risked her job to help a struggling family, and soon local news outlets picked up the story. Rebecca's act of kindness became a symbol of hope for the community, and people from all walks of life reached out to her, offering support and gratitude. Some even started donating to the non-profit where she worked, inspired by her selflessness. And then something incredible happened. One day, while Rebecca was working at the non-profit, she received a letter in the mail. It was from a woman she had never met, but the letter explained everything. The woman had been struggling herself, trying to keep her small business afloat in the face of financial hardships. After hearing about Rebecca's story, she had been so moved that she decided to offer her a partnership. She wanted to open a grocery store that would serve as both a business and a community hub, a place where struggling families could come and get help, even if they didn't have enough money. Rebecca was floored. The woman's offer was more than she had ever dreamed of. Together, they opened Hope Grocers, a small but thriving grocery store that operated on a pay-what-you-can model. Families who couldn't afford their groceries could still get what they needed, and those who were better off could contribute extra to help others. The store became a beacon of light in the community, and it wasn't long before other businesses and volunteers joined in the effort. What had started as one small act of kindness had blossomed into a movement that changed countless lives. Years later, Rebecca stood outside of Hope Grocers, watching as families walked in and out of the store with smiles on their faces. She had come a long way from the days of working as a cashier at Ridgewood Supermarket, but the lessons she had learned along the way had stayed with her. One small act of kindness could ripple outwards, touching lives in ways she had never imagined. As she stood there, a familiar face approached her, the man from that fateful night, the one who had started it all. His little girl, now older, ran ahead of him, laughing as she chased after a butterfly in the warm summer air. "Rebecca," he called out, waving as he approached, "I see the store is doing well." Rebecca smiled, her heart full. "It is. Thanks to you and so many others." The man shook his head. "No, it's thanks to you. You changed everything." Rebecca looked out at the bustling store, at the families who were no longer struggling to feed their children, at the volunteers who had come together to build something beautiful. And she realized that he was right. One small act of kindness really could change everything. In life, we are often faced with choices that test our character. Rebecca's decision to help a struggling family, even at the cost of her job, set off a chain of events that transformed not only her life, but the lives of countless others. Kindness has a way of spreading, of growing into something bigger than we ever imagined. And sometimes, when we give selflessly, the universe has a way of giving back to us in ways we never expected. If you enjoyed this story, YouTube thinks you'll like these stories also.